Hey guys, welcome to the basement workshop. I'm doing a little bit of rearranging and I thought it'd be a great time to talk about another estate treasure. That would be this vintage bookcase, and more importantly the contents of it. This, along with many of the items I've been showing you over the past few months, came from the Bill Lill estate. He was an engineer at Bell, or scientist, I think, at the Bell Labs way back in the day, and he was an experimenter, ham radio, machinist, jack of all trades, and he had a lot of interesting books packed in here. I took some out to lighten the load so I could move it across the basement. Let's take a look at what's left in here right now. This cabinet itself has some age to it, but it's not, I wouldn't think it's an antique. For example, the glass is just one single piece. If it was really old, these would be individual pieces of glass and there'd be some waviness to it. But it's nice, it's real wood, it has little caster wheels, which is great for a cement basement, so I can move it around, and this is just how he had it in his basement. And it is a great size to hold technical books, because it's just the right size. You can get 4 good shelves of books in here. Let's start out with some that are mine that I added to this because it just made sense to. One is a classic book on television by Milton Kiver, I believe, Television Simplified. I highly recommend this if you want to learn about some theory of television from back in the day. I think this was from the 40s. First edition 46. So, the dawn of commercial television in the United States. This is another excellent book, Radio Handbook. There were many editions of it. This is the 10th, which I found very handy. I've had this for many, many, many years. This is a common feature in many books from back in the 40s, 50s, 60s for hobbyists, is that the back section would be ads. Even though it's a textbook or handbook, they had ads in it like a magazine would, but they're all in one section towards the back. And then the rest of it, construction articles, theories of operation, there's tube data in here, lots of interesting stuff to read through and projects you could build. So, another textbook I very much recommend if you're interested in vintage ham radio stuff. Alright, now let's take a look at some of his books, which spanned a wide range. I'd say from the 1910s up through the 90s, probably. For example, here's a newer book all about vertical antennas. He had a number of books all about antenna theory, antenna design, something I admit I'm very deficient in. I understand what a dipole is, but not a whole lot beyond that. So I should probably spend some time and look through these. Very dry read, for sure. Get into a lot of math and formulas, and again, ads in the back, which especially on the older ones, I find that to be some of the more interesting stuff to look at and drool over. And, well, can't buy this stuff new. If you're lucky, you could hunt around eBay or go to a ham fest and maybe you could find it. But at least you can see what was available back then and what stuff cost. Back when lots of folks were buying components and building their own radios and their own antennas, big mass in your backyard. Do some DXing. So, good stuff. Yet another whole book just on beam antennas. That's how much there is to this subject. So many different ways to build them, different materials you can use, different ways of grounding it, different ways of stringing it up. All will affect their performance. Forrest Mims, man, that takes me back to the 80s. Forrest Mims wrote a lot of books, cookbooks, I guess you could say. Well, that's what some of them are called, I think. Little circuits that you could build yourself, often based around an op amp or a classic 555 timer. They do little things, blink a light or generate a waveform. I like this too. It was written by hand on graph paper and then turned into a little book, and apparently sold this at Radio Shack. There we go, classic 741 op amp. So you could breadboard these, and that's what I was doing back. That's how I learned a lot about electronics, was just little handbooks like this. And I'm sure back in the 80s you could buy all these parts at Radio Shack. You could build these circuits and play around with it and learn a little bit, hopefully. Moving on. Alright, now we get into some dry stuff. Electronic engineering principles. Tell you what, I'm going to grab a tripod so I can give you a better look at these books. And I'm going to pull these out and bring them into another area so I'm not all shaky and making you guys seasick. Now there is a lot of material here. I can't possibly go through it all in any detail in this video. So perhaps what I'll do is give you a brief idea of what each book is. If there are any that you all would like to see in more detail, let me know, and if maybe we'll do a little poll or something like that, and I'll go through some of them a little more slowly and show you more of what's in there. And I think some of these may have been scanned and are available online, but I suspect a lot of them are not. This is something he just had hanging up in the basement. Boy, I wouldn't mind finding a little box full of these. These are very prized audio output tubes, the Western Electric 300B. Well, I forgot where we left off, so we'll just start with this one. Now, I also have to admit I haven't looked through all of these, so some of them we're gonna explore together. McGraw-Hill Electrical and Electronic Engineering Series, Electronic Measurements. I'm going to guess this is going to be a little dry. Probably a lot of theory, a lot of formulas, maybe a lot of tables. Let's see, year 1952. It's a college text and a reference book for practicing engineer. Let's see. Chapter 1, voltage and current. Chapter 2, power. Chapter 3, circuit constants or lump circuits. Distributed constants, measurement of frequency, waveform, phase, time interval measurement. So basically, sounds like it's how to measure all your fundamental electrical properties. Starting out with voltage and current. We'll talk about shunts and meters and how to bridge circuits and how to measure things. And by measure things, I mean, given the means available at the time, say an analog meter, how can you measure these various quantities which may exceed, say you have a meter that can read 1 milliamp. Well, how the heck can you measure, say, a 10 amp circuit? Well, you can by using a shunt. That's the kind of thing they talk about. Or measuring a voltage that exceeds what your meter can do, well, you can use a voltage divider. Or if you want to measure very small amounts, you're going to have to amplify them and make sure you do it accurately. Which is exactly what this is for a VTVM. So a VTVM is a very high input impedance because it actually has vacuum tubes in it that amplify the incoming signal. So, it sounds like, I figured there'd be plenty on bridge circuits. A bridge is a way to compare a known quantity to an unknown quantity and display the difference on a meter. And if you create a scale on it that reads appropriately, you can directly read the value off of it. So when you see me using, say, my old solar capacitance bridge to measure an unknown capacitor, this is how it works. I'm going to explain the theory behind it in here. And when you get into RF kind of stuff, then it gets a little more esoteric. So not exactly casual reading or very entertaining, and it's a bit outdated, but the fundamentals are always going to be the same. So it can be interesting to read through. Okay, fundamentals of vacuum tubes. That's a little more interesting, potentially. And this is from, let's see, looks like somebody bought this in 1940 originally, and it passed through some hands. I have not seen this book before. 37. Ooh. So when they're talking fundamentals, it's going to be pretty early fundamentals. So, yeah, not surprisingly, we're looking at tubes that are the early construction with globes and such. But this is why I like looking at these books for pictures like this. A 50,000 watt high voltage rectifier for a broadcasting station KOA in Denver. So we got a bank of high voltage capacitors down here. It looks like those, a little hard to see, are mercury rectifiers. And it's a large glass item in there. Phanotron rectifiers, whatever those are. Looks like some serious industrial stuff. Polyphase rectifier using hot cathode mercury vapor tubes. Oh, pages. I was trying to get the pages apart, but actually the paper is quite thick that they used. I thought I had several pages stuck together. Some high quality paper they use. There's a better look at a Phanotron. I have never heard of a Phanotron, but the gist seems to be it was an early type of high power rectifier. Related to the Tungar, which is a high current to low voltage rectifier, typically used in battery chargers and I think arc welders. Wow, it's wild. 100,000 volt half amp single phase rectifier, full wedge bridge circuit using I don't know exactly what they're using. They look, they could be Tungars, they could be mercury rectifiers or something else, but wow. There are some videos on YouTube showing early high power mercury rectifiers, like for used for railroads, that they have operational. It's wild with the purple blue glow, these giant tubes. Wow. 3,000 kilowatt 600 volt metal tank mercury arc rectifier. So that thing is the rectifier. Rather than using glass, they have in the metal tank. Crazy. Okay, this is probably going to be a long video. I'm going to go through the books at this rate, but I haven't looked at this book before. This is some cool stuff. That was one of the first types of rectifiers you could buy, typically used in battery eliminators. Raytheon invented this type of gas-filled cold cathode diode. So there's no filament glowing in there, and it's not mercury. They used some other type of inert gas, I believe. Wasn't very efficient, but it could rectify AC into DC. There's some Tungars, kind of like light bulbs. Alright, so that was just rectifiers. And of course they're going to go into triodes and pentodes, and oh, there's an eye tube. Photo detector. There's some tube data in here, it looked like. Just a handful of types of tubes available in the 30s. Alright, what else? Principles of Radio by Henny. So this would be another theory book, I'm guessing, from the early days, like 40s, just by the smell of it and the feel of it. Whoa, first edition, 1929. I was off a bit. Updated, new forward or new preface in 1937. So this is going to be very old school, I expect. I think I just saw mention to a Neutrodyne receiver go flying by, negative feedback circuits. And, well, no, 37, yeah, they would definitely had super hats by then, so. Anyway, this is going to cover basic radio receiver theory, load lines for designing amplifiers. It's always fun to find little things. Holy cow, somebody had some insanely nice handwriting. Maybe a fountain pen. Check that out. Man, my chicken scratch does not compare to that. Cathode Ray Tube at Work Rider. Great book, but I've had a copy for many years that's much larger than this, much thicker. And that is the gentleman that was from. I'm thinking maybe this is a really early version. 45. Well, it first came out in 35. CRTs were a pretty new thing in 35. Now, honestly, this book is pretty boring because the equipment that used CRTs back in the 30s, early 40s was really basic. Oscilloscopes couldn't do a whole lot. Generally, they just had an X and a Y input and maybe a really crude horizontal sweep circuit. So a lot of what you see are really basic waveforms, and a lot of it is lithogous patterns where you're driving both the X and the Y with two different signals, and you are inferring some information based on how they interact with each other. So it's a lot of stuff like that. No graticule, no detailed measurements. It's just the overall shape of the waveform. And actually they're using this for doing alignments. It was very unusual for somebody to do a visual alignment in the 30s or early 40s, that's for sure. Your average serviceman could not have afforded this kind of stuff. And the sweep generators that were available that you would need to make such a thing happen were really tough to get. So there, for example, that's a typical oscilloscope. There's very little to it. Most of it is circuitry just to power the cathode ray tube. We'll just have 5 tubes in it. Even the tubes, it's hard to even tell where they are because the symbols are so different. But for example, that is a tube. Eggert model VRO oscillograph. Yeah, that's what they called a lot of them back then, oscillographs. And that's what the front of it looked like. not much to it. Now I'm laughing, but then again, have you found one of those now? I imagine it's rather collectible. Can't be many of them left around. They probably didn't make very many to begin with. So as much as I like cathode ray tubes, these really early books, they're a little boring. Because there were so few types available. The 900 series was basically what you could get. So for example, that's a 906. So there you go. There's your oscilloscope. That's that's super basic. Where you have a rectifier, and that makes it it's a line-derived high-voltage power supply with dividers for focusing, and they power the sweep just right off of the line, and then you just have your input signal go right to the deflection plates, and that's what you get. Not to put these guys down or anything. I mean, this was cutting edge technology at the time. All I'm saying is, don't expect much out of these books. Apparently he was trying to learn German. So did I. One semester in college. I learned very, very little. This looks like they try to get you to actually read to have whole stories entirely in German. Alrighty. Allied's Radio Formula and Data Book. These are pretty common back then for guys to keep handy. Little charts of all kinds of things, like logarithm charts, metric conversion, resistor color code, of course. Oh, if we could still read the colors on this old wiring, there was actually a system for coloring wires on transformers for the primary and the secondaries and the filaments and so on. Well, apparently there were some sort of standards for speaker connectors too. Wire gauges. You didn't really have calculators back then, so you often needed tables and charts. Well, you had slide rules, I suppose. Basic formulas. Alright. A Western Electric publication. I wonder if this is worth something. Generally, no matter what it is, if it has Western Electric on it, it's worth something. Audiophones. I believe that's another term for headphones. Yes, very stylish. Looks like she's got her little radio there, and she's wearing some headphones. There you go. So I wonder if that's the microphone and an earphone, and it's both. Oh, wait a minute. This is a hearing aid. And that's the amplifier, microphone amplifier, and then earpiece. That would make more sense. Sensitive microphone, a small receiver. Kind of makes it sound like it's a radio, but I don't think it is. A rheostat and an amplifier. Ran off of. That's a pretty seriously big battery, it looks like. Judging by the clothes, the year appears to be about 1930. Oh yeah. If I read more closely, yeah, right on the front. Some facts on hearing aids and hearing aid. We'll either call it an audio phone, so to remove a little bit of a stigma of it, rather than calling it a hearing aid. Speaker enclosures. Sam's. Yeah, so Sam's didn't just produce Photo Fact. They made a whole range of other publications for many years. And this one is about speaker enclosure design. Cool stuff if you want to build your own speaker cabinets. Infinite baffles and acoustic labyrinths and such. Other Sam's. 101 ways to use your ham test equipment. Now this can be really, really useful. So you plenty of books on theory, books on servicing, but books that actually tell you practical ways to use the equipment you have to accomplish things. That's what you really want to know. How to use a scope as a portable modulation monitor. Check the frequency response of a TVI filter. How to measure hum level in a speech amplifier. How to measure the input impedance of a receiver. So it's like very handy, practical stuff. How to measure the inductance of a coil. Alton Electronic Parts Company. Unfortunately, there's not much on it. Oh, I guess this is the receipt from actually buying the book. In 1953, it looks like. Maybe for $1.25, if I'm reading that chicken scratch accurately. Why would somebody buy this? Got me. Originally published in '44, unless you were just interested in how World War II radar systems work. More antenna books, wave propagation theory, some more really esoteric stuff, magnetic amplifiers theory and application. I'm not even sure what a magnetic amplifier is. Saturable core reactor device, feedback amplifier. I'm guessing it's something that we really don't use these days, and that's why I'm not sure what it is. Looks just like advertising blurbs for other publications they put out. The fact that this book looks so pristine and still has the original sales literature makes me think maybe this wasn't read a whole lot. More antenna. Alternating current fundamentals. This will probably be a very dry read with a lot of math. Oh yeah. Assume a lot of trigonometry in here. Understanding amplitude modulation. This could be a useful read. Another Sam's Photo Fact publication. Quickly dying away. Not a lot of applications use amplitude modulation anymore, it's my understanding. Even the AM band looks like it's going to be going digital in the not too distant future. It looks like we've got the theory behind it and some circuits on how to actually achieve amplitude modulation. Elements of mechanics. published by the International Textbook Company in Scranton, Pennsylvania. 1943. Composition of matter, physical properties of matter, velocity, weight and mass, work and energy, laws of motion, Newton's laws. Yeah, looks like your basic mechanical engineering kind of stuff. Inclined planes, pulleys, gears, and so on. Takes me back to high school. Radio handbook. I think we saw this, but this is a really early version from 36. Cost you a whole buck back then. There's going to be definitely some primitive stuff. There's a 1,000-watt transmitter using 150Ts or 354s. Two giant tubes in there. That's good stuff I like to see, though, the ads for triplet tube tester. See what the original ads look like, see what the stuff costs. So again, the back of the book is advertisement, and then the rest will be a bunch of projects you can build and some theory and general knowledge. Well, it's kind of neat if you want to build this stuff. They really go into detail, like how to actually wind your own coils, what the diameter and the number of turns, and what size wire gauge to use. Breadboard layout for all the components. And you could buy all these components from the ads in the back of the book. Tube data. So yeah, it's an earlier version of that other book we looked at. Another very practical book from Sam's, 101 Ways to Use Your VOM and VTVM. And a few more dry books coming up, Electronic Engineering Principles with revisions. More diagrams, more theory, more equations. Circuits in Electrical Engineering, Apprentice Hall Engineering Series, 1950. It's probably a lot more of the same kind of stuff. Formulas, diagrams, some basic circuits. Electrical Engineer's Handbook, 4th edition, Communication Electronics. Discarded book, 1976, library. The R&D Library, Teletype Corporation. Let's see when this is actually published, though. 30s or 40s. 1950. Very thin paper. Yeah, this is super dry. More diagrams, more charts, more formulas. Surprising though, they actually, the Image Orthicon, they have television stuff in here. Luminescent and tenebrescent materials. Just caught my accent, I've never saw that term before. Photoluminescences of some phosphors as functions of temperature. Interesting. I wonder if the temperature affected luminescences. So here's different phosphor compositions and the wavelength light you get, very applicable to cathode ray tubes, color picture tubes, and so on. They definitely did a lot of experimenting back in the day to get the colors right. Anywho, hints and kinks for the radio amateur. 333 practical ideas for the station and workshop with a ready reference index. Workshop, huh? Maybe I get some ideas about setting up my workshop out of this. Oh, looks like it's how to use discarded materials to make probes and things. Tools that one might want to have in the workshop. I think I've got all those. I joke with some of this stuff is handy, like how to make a braided connection. I'm sure there's stuff in here on how to dress leads, how to make coil forms. So if they have modifications you can make for some of the commercial receivers that were available at the time. How to modify surplus receivers, that was a big thing. There were a ton of surplus receivers on the market in the 40s, 50s, 60s. A lot of articles on how to modify them for amateur ham use. Not so useful these days, really, though. Alright, actually, I've gotten through more than half the stuff. Reference data for radio engineers. I guess, yeah. Charts, tables, formulas. Material characteristics. Allied Electronics Data Handbook, same deal, different publication, tables, charts, formulas, circuits. Tube substitution guide. Didn't really look at that one. I lost track. These are all mine. I've talked about these before. These are all great TV books, especially Milton Kiver, Television Analyzed, Simplifying, if you want to learn how to troubleshoot classic TVs from the 40s, 50s, 60s. Good stuff. I think he specifically shows you how to use the B&K 1077B, if not in this publication, in other ones. Yeah, there we go. Well, this is an earlier edition of it, but that's the 1076, 1075. Test pattern generator and signal generator you can use to troubleshoot TVs. Next up, Audell's New Electric Library, illustrated diagrams. I've seen a few of these Audell books over the years. They're nice because they have, well, might be real leather binding, I'm not sure, but they are sort of soft cover. So more of the same. Mixture of old pictures, old diagrams, circuitry. Well, this must be pretty early. They're talking about synchronized sound with movies. Talkies, in other words. The Billy Little Xmas 1940, so I must have gotten this when he was a kid. Well, he served in World War II, it's my understanding, so couldn't have been that young in 1940. So as the page numbers are in the 4,000, so this must be a series of books, and they continue the page numbering from volume to volume. Neat little thing. 100 radio hookups. This is very likely a reprint. It's far too nice for something that would be from the early 1920s. Yeah, it's printed in 91. There's old school. When all you have is basically a coil of wire, cat's whisker, and a capacitor, and a set of earphones. Well, they do have some circuits with tubes, but there weren't many available back then. Let's see. Practical applied electricity. Don't think we looked at this one yet. This is a very, very dense book, similar to the Oddells with the leather binding, but these must be really thin pages. Feels like I'm holding a brick. Okay, some of this is pretty old. It's very hard to turn the pages. Whoa, 1911. And this copy 1913, maybe? Well, this will be pre-vacuum tube. Alright, well, we have to jump right to one section as soon as I take a quick flip through this. So, yeah, this is going to just be basic wiring, generators, motors. There weren't a whole lot of applications for electricity in 1913, I don't think. So, what jumped out at me is on page 386, resuscitation. Resuscitation from apparent death from electrical shock. Oh, I thought they were going to show about using electricity to resuscitate somebody, not what to do if somebody apparently has died from an electric shock. That's a little gruesome. Jeez. Man, force the jaws apart with a stick, piece of wood, or the handle of a pocket knife. Man, dash cold water on their face. Yikes. Anyway, I think this is the oldest of all these books. Oh, next up. Radio engineering. I don't think we know what's going to be in here. .47. It's going to be tables and diagrams and formulas and basic circuits. Hey, some talk of television. Propagation. There's a whole lot on propagation radio waves. Modulation, oscillation, tuned amplifiers. and so on. Ooh, another dry looking book. Standard Handbook for Electrical Engineers, 7th edition. See, there are some pages right there. Helmholtz coil. Let's see what that is. This one has tabs in it. It's a pretty massive volume here. 1941. Oh, I was just using it for the bookmark. And I actually tell you what a Helmholtz coil is on this page. Well, and again, he does say, see page 329. Oh, yeah. In the Helmholtz coil arrangement, 2 equal coils are set coaxially within the... coaxially with their mean planes separated by a distance equal to the mean radius of a coil. Man, alright. I'm one sentence in and it's already getting over my head. This is not an easy read. There's some nice pictures. Alkali chloride electrolysis. There sure is a lot in here. Electrochemistry, electricity and aviation, trolley buses, railway signaling, trucks and car bodies, resistance welding, resistance furnaces, inductive heating, motor control, fractional horsepower motors, traveling cranes, electric elevators, steel mills, and so on. Light bulbs, switchboards. It's dense. Not exactly fun reading. Alright, which I think gets us to the final section. We have 4 big tomes that are all related. The final thing we're going to look at is 4 bound volumes of QST magazine, which started in 1915. Magazine on amateur radio, basically. So we have 25, 27, 28, 29. I'm missing 26. So these were magazines that had plenty of ads and talked about advancements in radio technology, had circuits you could build, tips on boosting performance of radios. Again, I think the best thing in these, sure, some of the projects are interesting, but I really like the old ads and some of the announcements when a new tube type came out or a new radio model. You get back into the 20s and 30s, building your own radio is far, far more of a thing than it is today. There are many, many people in the hobbies, so there are many companies selling individual parts. So you could build your own crossword puzzles. It was there were a lot of people into this, there were a lot of publications, a lot of generated a ton of interest. It was a new thing. It was a new thing and it really captured the public's imagination, so there was plenty of information out there. I think these are call lists or call logs. So these are people listing all the contacts they made with their equipment at home. I think that's what that is. Contact meaning you've used your equipment and you verify that you contacted these people and made a note of it in your logbook at date and time and their call sign and such. Crosley one-tube radio. Crosley 50. $14.50 for a one-tube radio. So, I have 4 volumes of this. You can imagine it's just more and more of the same. It just gets slightly newer as you go through the years. Noticing this over and over again. Yeah, I guess there was a regular publication where they just listed, people would send in their call logs and they would publish it. Crazy. Alright, that is going to be it. If you want to see a deeper dive into any of these books, please let me know and I can go through them more slowly. And some of them are 1,000 pages or so, so we're not going to look at everything. But at any rate, I hope you enjoyed this look at some vintage engineering textbooks and magazines and such.